So if you just think about all the things there are to eat, drink, or have sex with, and then think of all the good things there are to eat, drink, and have sex with, you'll notice that they're not the same things, right? And that's the startling discovery that our appetites by themselves aren't enough. So for example, right, I'm sure if you haven't seen this, it's really horrifying. Nothing horrifying happens, so it's in the sense that, you know, it's visceral, but once you know what you're seeing, it's creepy, right? So an Aborigine woman goes into a supermarket, buys a 2-pound bag of sugar, comes out and sits down outside and eats it. So if you think, God, she shouldn't do that. Well, but we are set up so that, you know, by our evolution, to when we run across, say, some honey in the wild, so not much natural sugar out there, but when we run across a hive of bees and they've got honey, it's a really good idea to eat all of it. First, it's high energy. You may not run into any for ages, right? And we're set up this way for a whole lot of things. So that if we go back, these are usually called the circumstances. This is the place where we evolved, right? So we, Homo sapiens, the things that we are the product, based on one story about them, of evolution. And our propensities, our inclinations, our motivational self was shaped very largely by our evolutionary history. And in the circumstances of evolution, it paid to have it, right? It was beneficial. If it weren't beneficial in getting your genes into the next generation, if it weren't, we wouldn't have survived, right? So it's good to have it in one way, but put it into a different evolutionary niche, put it into a world with supermarkets and your desire to eat sugar, your basic one. Same with salt. That's why high fat, high salt, high sugar diets are the most popular diets worldwide, but they're not good for you if you live in a world where there are fast food restaurants. In the wild, in the circumstances of evolution, they were very beneficial because there wasn't that much salt, sugar, and fat around, and those were very important to your survival. So having a built-in urge towards them was really good for you, but it's not very good in our social circumstances. And you can see the effects, right? Early onset diabetes, right? Obesity, problems with obesity. We have, in one part of the world, our part, the so-called first world, right? First world societies, the problem is overeating. And in the third world, that's undereating. If we could redistribute the calories, we'd have a much better world, right? Some people eat way more than is good for them, and some people have much less to eat than is good for them. So that's a real problem of plenty, is that there's a collateral health problem. In fact, it's not just a health problem. Any idea how much extra money each year it costs to fly overweight people around the world than people whose weight is normal? I mean, it's so shocking. There's billions of dollars, right? All that extra fuel is required because all those people on the plane weigh a lot more than people from the first world. That's remarkable. You know, if you start doing the economics on the health costs of overeating, they're enormous. Apart from the fact, of course, that in order to overeat, we not just want to overeat, but we want to overeat things that's very bad for the ecosystem of the world to produce, like meat. And then you put all that in, and then look at how bad it is now for us to have those appetites that motivate us quite independently without looking at all to our overall good. They just operate on us. Another way to look at them, of course, is that they're part of the motivational set of animals that don't have the kind of rational components that we do, right? So they're primitive in that sense, as well as. Yeah. So we've got these things in us that they're not good sensitive. They don't track our good. They just push us towards eating, drinking, or having sex, and in some ways it's very good that they do. So let's take the good case, even in the modern world, right? So think about the way that our appetites operate on us. So don't eat for a while, and what happens? You start to feel discomfort, right? You feel pain, hunger pangs, as we call it, right? And what's that? It's a little, alarm going off and saying, don't forget to eat, right? And if you were me and you didn't have those, you probably would forget to eat. And then eventually you would pay a bigger cost. And of course the same is true for sex and thirst. If we weren't, our sexual desires don't operate right this way. Now it would be nice to have a sexual desire. That would be good to have one, so I think I'll have one now. What happens is they come in from left field, like your hunger, and suddenly you've got one, maybe at a very inopportune moment. Right? You really should be thinking about your geometry exam, but that's not what you're thinking about. I won't say what you are thinking about, but it's something not geometrical. And that's right, our sexual desires operate in that sense independently of central control. And it's good that they do, because right, at least it used to be good that our sexual desires operated this way, because that resulted in our reproducing. Now that we've separated through birth control methods, contraceptives, the direct connection between our sexual desire and it's not so clear how that one, whether it benefits us in the same way or not. But anyway, that's how they operate. Okay, so that takes care of the appetites. There are things in us, and that's why, in a way, there's this kind of psychic conflict, right? They motivate us directly, not through central planning. And so central planning has to step in and say, no, right? No, you can't do that now. No, you can't have that now. No, that's too much, right? So this is busy working, not through central control, and central control has to sort of step in. That's phase one. All right. Yes, we all good. Okay. So now let's look at. So we've got rational desires. Those are maximally good dependent, right? They track the overall good of everything. We've got the not good related at all. Now tell me, go back to spirited desires and tell me a little bit more about what they're like. We've said something about them, but let's fill out the picture. So give me something. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, was spirited when he talked about creating like inner harmony between all of your motivational sets?
Yeah.
Was that spirited or was that rational?
Well, it would certainly be good to try to produce some harmony, right? And so one of the goals of reason, and one of the things that Plato thinks is really the best, is, as he says, when all the parts sing the same song, they're in harmony with one another. And we want to talk about how you bring that happy thing about. That's right. And spirit has a role to play in that. Plato says spirit is the ally of reason, unless it's been corrupted by a bad opponent. So we're going to want to be able to explain how spirit is the ally of reason and what it does to be the ally of reason. But let's talk about it by itself for a second and see how it operates in our lives. So give me an example, tell me some stories about it. We've seen one, right? Spirit urges Odysseus to kill the people who are attacking his honor. So spirit and honor are closely tied. So tell me something about honor or spirit. Each one will help us understand the other. So to talk about honor first, that's easy. What do you need for honor?
Spirited desire urges Evgeny Onegin to kill his best friend, Lenski.
Yeah. And why?
Is
so what
because
is?
It's
true,
society, so spirited desire is connected directly to your upbringing and society, and it's the idea I want to be loved and and I want to be, surrounded by people that it's
I
search
think-
for love.
I think you bring
And-
out one of the most, so now let's look at our spiritual component. Now let's kind of go over here so we have some room to talk about it. So one is, so appetites are things that don't require other people, right? I mean, if you're hungry and there's food, you don't need somebody else, right? Sex does require somebody else, but you might think, we won't perhaps explore that too much, but let's sort of leave it there. Let's focus on drink and food. At least in their case, you don't need other people. In the case of sex, what's important about it is, you don't need the other person as a possessor of a psychology. So think about rape for a moment, and never mind whether you think it's a crime of violence or a sexual crime. No, that doesn't matter. The point is, in order to have it, as your man anyway, right, the other person requires certain things, but not other things. So, it's easiest to just leave it out for now and come back to it later. And look instead at just those two. So you need a consumable object, right? You might think that especially women can become objects of consumption in exactly the same way, which is an unfortunate fact, but true, I think. So anyway, sticking to food and drink, you just need those consumable objects if you've got appetites. But what about spirit? Well, as Ina said, what you need in part for spirit is other people, right? Honor comes from others, right? So look at the case of Leontius. He wants to look at the naked bodies, but he feels the eye of the other, the one that will withhold honor and say, that's bad, don't do that, right? That's the thought. So when we look at honor, right, we're looking into a social world. So here's Mary, and she's in the social world, right? And she's got appetites, but right, there's also, as part of every social world, there is the I, that's how I draw the I. There's the I of the other looking. And when Freud, who says, all I have to say about the soul I learned from the immortal Plato. I don't think he learned it, if I correctly, but that's a different question. He says, right, in us we develop very quickly, we call it a superego, an inner representation of the other, usually a parent figure, right? That already, right, even when there's no other person in the room, is there as if another person is saying, no, don't do that. So we feel shame doing certain kinds of things, even when nobody is looking at us, right? It's as if there is a camera, right, another person looking. So that's a big part about the social world, is that honor, right, comes others. And you mentioned, in addition to honor coming from others, there's also something like love, right? There are other things we want, right? So take the sort of obvious thing is, right, well, maybe if you just have something on the order of animal sexual desire, it's just a desire to mate. So if female humans went into heat the way dogs do, every once a year, right, life would be very different than those. If you've ever seen dogs in action, right? So if there's a female dog in heat, right, and the male dogs from all around just come around, they sit there, waiting for something, hoping, I don't know what, looking lost until they get their chance. But our social world would be our sexual social world would be very different if it was like that. So, but mostly what we want is not just mating, right? We want, that's a lesser sort of version of our sexual desire. We also want love. We want to be loved by another person whom we love. And notice that involves the psychology of the other person, as well as you, right? So in love, right, or friendship, you think this, right? What does the other person want? And how can I represent, first I have to be able to represent their wants, and then I have to be able to think not just about my desires, but about theirs, and how to satisfy theirs, not just mine. And that's the beginning of the I-me, I-you distinction, right? It's when as small children infants don't, right? They don't represent themselves and the other and their desires as opposed to the other person's desires. It's when we get there that we're beginning to develop a sense of me and my desires versus you and your desires. And I'm able to represent those two and notice in myself, right, desires to satisfy the desires of another person. I have to be able to think that way. And sometimes, of course, creepily, the desires of the other person can usurp the place of my own desires. So it's that I become the slave of the other person. Instead of having desires of my own, I leech my desires from someone else. Another problem of ethics, which we'll, with luck, come back to. Okay, so in the social world, honor and our ability to gain the approval of others and to gain their love, right, as opposed to their hatred and enmity, that becomes a crucial factor for dependent, right, beings like us. Beings who are not omnipotent, can't fully defend themselves against everybody, right, need the help and love of others, right. We've got already something that Thrasymachus doesn't really pay any attention to. The ring of Gyges will get you into the other person's house and will even get you into another person's bedroom. But if what you want to find there is love and approval, you're not going to get it just because you have the ring of Gyges, right? Because the other person has to give that to you. You can't steal it from them, right? They have to willingly love and approve of you, and you can't get that just by being powerful. That's one of the nice facts about power, is it's limited. So unless you're a pathological, that is, you're a psychopath, you don't care about things like love and affection. Right? You've got to face up to the fact that there is a lot, as we say, that money can't buy. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of in terms of like simulator accessibility.
Yeah.
It seems like most people who have problems who are kind of sociopathic.
Yeah.
Are able to get the love and affection by faking it, and so pretending to be empathetic because it's beneficial.
Yeah. I think that you're right, they're able to fool the other person into thinking that they're lovable and into acting, to loving them. But I think that they at the very same time fail to get what they want. Can anyone see why? So here I am, right? I simulate love and concern for you, right? I seem to be the perfect partner, right? I simulate all of that, but I'm simulating it, right? I don't really have those feelings for you. I just know that that's the way to get you to have them for me. And so I'm successful. I get you to have those feelings. On you, they're genuine, right? So you genuinely have them. But I still fail in my goal. I fail to achieve my goal. Why?
Well, if the goal is to be loved, then they're loving the simulator, not the...
Yeah, so the thought is, what I've done is I've replaced my true self with a false self. The false self is love, but the true self is not. And that's a way in which it's like the other person remains sort of starved. And it's even worse, right? Because by simulating, they've insulated themselves from any possibility of getting the love they want, right? As long as they remain hidden behind that scrim, they won't ever get it. Okay, so anyway, that's just sort of adding some layers to the story. But so now we've got these three elements in us, and we can see them, right? So this is the way, a very simplified version of Freud, the child, the infant, first I forget the story. No, I don't know. Right. So the child first wants to please herself. As she wants to get her appetite satisfied, right? She wants to be fed, cuddled, right? Those things. Then the child wants to please her mother. Right? She sees that these first layers get satisfied by a mother who cares for her. Right? So she's got an incentive to care for her mother. Right? But then she does it, as we say, for its own sake. She sees there's something good about loving and being loved. That has nothing to do with being fed or clothed. That's all. Then finally, the child wants to be her mother. That is, she wants to be a grown-up in her own right. Pleasing others and pleasing herself, both, right? So that's a little story. It's a very good one, I think, to keep in your repertoire. That we're not any one of those. We grow up into all three of those, through all three of those stages, and we never quite outgrow any of them. So first the child wants to please herself, then her mother, then to be her mother. And this is a question which I think is really central to ethics and neglected. So I don't think anyone else, certainly no one in our department has ever written a dissertation on it, no graduate student here. It's a terrific research topic. It's this question: what is it to be an adult? So what is it to grow up? So, right, the child wants to be an adult, wants to be a grown-up, right? But what would it be to be a grown-up? And when do you get to be one? So, what age do you think you get to be a grown-up? It's a really interesting question. I mean, you can think this, 18, 21. We have legal age for certain kinds of things, right? And you're considered when it says adults only, that's grown-ups only, or anyway, one way of looking at it. But there's a legal motion. So what age do you have any idea what age Plato thinks we become a grown-up? Yeah, you probably read this probably here, but 55, 50 to 55. That's when you're a grown-up then, because then you've got what it takes to be able to understand the world and your place in it. Right? That's a hard job, right? And it takes a lot of education and so on to be able to get to the point where you actually do see the world around you. You're not in the cave anymore, right? You see the world around you, you know what you are, you know what other people are, and you're able to make rational decisions. It's kind of scary to think that you might be I'm past it. But you guys have so far to go. You're just children, right? And I think that the question is not who's right. The question is that it is a real question. And what we're thinking about, right, is going to, in part, determine our answer. Go ahead.
How old do you think Plato was
When he thought that? He was 12, of course. Yeah. I think he thought he was past that, yeah, of course. And so that's a worry, right? So one of the, so if we think about our own ethical development, you could sort of think it this way, right? So male property owners, starting with male warriors, they have the unquestioned status. Right? So theirs was the status to aspire to. And if we look at that warrior status and then how different groups came to fill it as new kinds of warfare occurred, fascinating story, right? That was the quintessential status. And then from that we got aristocracies of various kinds, right? As they used to be, the warriors, the ones who protected us and so on. So hold that thought for a second. Then think, right, so that was the privileged class. And it was privileged initially because of its social role, right? It was the protector class, right? Very important. Hold that, now think about who gets to go in on. Well, first, the property requirement was altered along a whole set of dimensions. So you didn't have to have a whole big load of landed property. You did it first, but not later. The property requirements went down and went down further and went down further. And still property, you still had to be a property holder in order to vote, for example. Right. Next, other non-warriors, non-privileged groups, women, began to enter the privileged class. That is, they could be full citizens, grown-ups, right? They could actually vote and do grown-up things and be members of parliament and be in the armed forces, do all those things that previously, be priests, right? Previously, all of these were closed to them. Oh, and it's various other groups, minorities of various sorts that get included. Children are the last holdout. So think about it, roll it back and think, what was it like to be a woman without the franchise? Or without, well, it meant that your wishes, wants, and needs were not a political subject. You were represented by your husband or head of household or father. You didn't have any real political influence except through them. And so what you wanted didn't register on the political scene really at all, right? You didn't have a vote, so who cares what you think? Right? Then you get the vote. Now women's issues become central political issues, right? Because, well, women vote, you know, and if you don't give them what they want, they won't vote for you, and then you won't get elected. So they've got political power, and with it comes political interest in their wants and needs. Children don't vote. And because they don't, children's welfare is a very unimportant political thing, except insofar as it registers through their parents. Now we've got what? Well, you know, increased sophistication and of children. So, you know, children are much more, you guys are much more, even when you were much younger, much more sophisticated participants in their social world than their predecessors were. They're better informed, they have more access to independent information, they don't rely entirely on their parents or schools, they've got little cell phones and other things that they can find out all kinds of things. And they're much more inclined to, anyway, my children were much more inclined to challenge your authority. If you say, well, you know, that's not, they say, oh no, look, no. Here it says right here, there's nothing wrong with doing this at all. It's perfectly okay. Here's the data, here are the statistics. What's happening, right? Well, childhood remains an area of political, I think, instability. The reason I bring all that up is that when we're thinking about ethics and about welfare and about whose welfare, we really have to consider these kinds of very broad questions about who should be in which privileged class. Are children moral agents? Well, they're kind of. It's not all right to kill them, for example. But they don't have moral status in this way, right? They can't sign agreements, they can't write checks, they can't serve in the armed forces, they can't enter into marriage, they can't give consent to sex, they can't do a whole set of things. And we might wonder where we should be drawing that line. So if we look across cultures, consent to sex, for example, is 18 in America, so statutory rape, even if it's consensual, even if you have sex with even if you're underage yourself, right? So two 17-year-olds having consensual sex are the female as being typically, the other way too, typically it's this way, right? The woman is actually being statutorily raped because you can't consent until you're 18. In Spain, I think it's 14, 15. That age varies. In some parts of the world, as soon as a girl begins to menstruate, she is eligible to consent. That's increasingly early. So menarche, the onset of menstruation, civilization has gotten earlier and earlier as diets have gotten better and better. And with the improvement of diet comes the development of especially secondary sexual quality. So think about, when do girls get breasts? Well, used to be as post-teens. Now, very young girls have already begun to, as we say, develop women's bodies. And that has huge consequences for how we think these kinds of things should be socially regulated. So the whole set of things go together in the picture. All right, so let's go back now to Plato for a second. So you raised this very important question. You said, okay, so we've got all these bits in us, all of these things in our motivational set. Look at how structured it's become and how now complex it is to answer Thrasymachus' question of what happiness is, right? Because it's very simple if what you think is, well, it's just intellectual satisfaction. Right? That makes it very simple, even if it's not easy to satisfy all your appetites. At least you know what you're doing. Right? But when we recognize that our motivational sets have spiritual desires in it, then the desire for the approval and love and honor from others enters into our own psychology, right? Not simply from the outside as something I've got to deal with, right? Simulate to get, but something I actually really do want to get. Yeah. Then power changes its nature. So, right, just think about it for a second. Here's the tyrant, right? Tyrant, so let's take it as Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan can, in the relevant sense, have any woman he wants, because he's got the power to just take, right? And he's got the power to take anything else he wants to. But imagine that Genghis, probably false in his case, I don't know, but let's suppose that in fact, he's got a good or tender side, and he really does fall in love with Angela. And so he's stalled. He doesn't just think, oh, Angela's just another one of those that I can rape. He thinks, no, I better be careful because I really do want Angela to love me. Notice the drama has changed. Who's got the power now? Not so easy to say, right? And so when we think about power, we want to be really careful to distinguish between coercive power, and then, right, the power to get what I want, which is no longer now simply coercive. For Thrasymachus, it's coercive, right? I can, if my sexual desire is just an appetite that can be satisfied by my having sex with someone, then it's coercive power, right? All I need to do is have the power to, same for food and drink. But when I move to wanting the love and approval of another person, that's not something I can coerce. So power now faces, because of our psychology, power has to take on a different shape. And who hasn't is going to be a very, so you can see an awful lot of male reaction to the discovery of this fact, right? So think of the way that women are routinely disparaged and despised, how they're talked about in locker rooms, even by prominent politicians, right? Think about how they're talked about. You can see that as, in fact, a sort of projection of impotence, right? As my recognition of my own lack of power is making me condemn the source, right? I'm talking badly about women because I realize how much I depend on them, right? It's a very difficult set of questions that we socially come to terms with in all kinds of ways. Okay, so, all right. Once we see that our very wants and needs determine a different picture of political power, we've already taken a huge step. Now, imagine that God wants love and affection too. That was the Christian story, right? Then you realize that God's power has to be talked about in a completely different ways. God doesn't just want to make all of us slaves that will go through loving motions. He wants people to freely love him. Let's suppose that's true. Then God's power changes radically. Here's one I think is I've thought about quite a bit. I think it's really interesting. Take God's supposed omniscience. God knows everything, is the Spirit. Now think about your private journal, also if you keep one diary, or your own private thoughts with that, right? So another person's loving you and recognizing you is in part respecting your boundaries, right? You don't just, you'd be a kind of creep if you found your boyfriend's or girlfriend's journal and you just thought you could read it, right? Or same with their email. We have privacy questions, and love and affection are very much tied to respecting those boundaries. So does God respect them? If he's a loving God, then the answer is yes, and that means he sets limits to his own omniscience, because there are things that, as a loving God, he can't do. Unless you let him know them, he doesn't try. Think of what a different conception that gives of divine power than the one that we are typically used to, which God appears just like a thug who can do whatever he wants. So that's very important. Part of what our being, what we are, is the need we have as being complex beings like this for zones of privacy. And think of intimacy as inviting another person into such a zone. And they're not coming in unless they're invited. Right? We think of this with the intent. That's why in rape, there are two questions, right? Not just the physical assault, but the violation of person and privacy and intimacy in its own way. It's a harm of a different kind that was perpetrated. So you with me? Okay, so that's the first thought is power gets reconfigured once we see that our psychology is like this. Now the final thought, which I just want to leave us with to think about for Wednesday, is the one that you brought up about harmonizing realities. So the question is going to be, what do we as possessors of motivational sets like this, and this is, even if we just took this as the one, maybe our motivational set is even more complicated than this, but let's suppose we just took this one. How would we harmonize it? What would it be to harmonize a social set like this? And that's the question we'll pick up on Wednesday. So I think it would be really good to reread the material, and so we're going to keep at it for a while. And so don't just think, oh, I've done it already. Read it again, and now in the light of what we've talked about today, and see if there are questions that grow out of it.